Thanks for tuning back in to Strength FM. Nicky Boy and I are back in action. We're here today with the Don. Here with Amir Fazeli. How you doing here?
How are you, mate? What's going on, boys?
Oh, we're doing well. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So we wanted to talk about a few things today. So a lot about, I guess, more on specifics of strength training, but I want to start off talking about, I guess, Adonis Athletics and the culture that you've created. And is taking over New South Wales especially. Yeah. So you want to talk us about how that all started, like back from day one?
Yeah. So Adonis Athletics has been open now for 8.5 years, almost exactly. And ages ago, like all throughout high school, I was into sport. I wasn't always into sport. I was a bit out of shape when I was early high school, and as you know, I got into middle high school and stuff like that. I started to get more and more into sport because I wanted to improve myself, I wanted to change myself and get in better shape. And because I got into sport and also more specifically into boxing in mid high school when I was about 15, 16 years old, I wanted to do training that supplemented my sport. And from that age, I remember from like about when I was not in year 9, year 10, so what's that, about 16 years old, I used to always roam back then there was no Facebook or anything, I used to always roam the forums on different websites for like strength and conditioning related stuff. So back then I used to read up on like Westside Barbell, and I used to go to a website, I don't know if your listeners will know this, it's called Sherdog.com. I used to be really into MMA and UFC back then, back in the earlier days. So they had like a weight training, a strength training section on that forum. So I used to always read up on that and stuff like that. And then through all these, research and reading, and I used to always spend time on there. Yeah. I came across Joe DeFranco's gym. Just back in the early days, super early days. Nobody really knew about it in Australia. And I was like, that's what it's all about. That's how strength training, strength and conditioning should be. And the issue was that all we had access to at that time was places like Fitness First and other commercial gyms, which, it's no fault of theirs. The type of people that they're trying to target is the general public, people who just want to generally be fit, be active, and train. So they didn't have, at least at that time, any like weightlifting equipment, bumper plates. You couldn't throw a medicine ball across the gym, you collect somebody's head, So you couldn't do things of that nature. So there was absolutely nothing as far as a commercially available place where you could sign up to, where you could go and do this type of stuff. The only thing the only option you had was if your mate owned a garage like gym, you could go and train there. You could take some medicine balls to the park or anything like that, So that was the frustration that I had in regards to, I just can't get any proper training done. If I was doing weightlifting at those places, I would have to actually lower the weight. Like after snatching, I'd have to lower it, put it back down, and then go again. If I was doing clean and jerks, I have to lower it, put it back down, and go again, because it was all metal plates and no platforms. Obviously now, as time has gone and the whole industry has changed and the market is demanding it, all those places now you can't go into a Fitness First or even some Anytime Fitnesses or any other franchise for that matter, any other brand, without seeing some weightlifting equipment in there, a couple of decent squat racks, which is great to see. So, but back then that was not the choice that you had, and I just knew in myself back then that I wanted to one day have a place where I could host not necessarily athletes, but people who wanted to train like I did, people who wanted to train seriously like I did, who wanted access to the right equipment like I did. And more importantly, probably the most important, was what I felt was missing at that time, anyway I went, was a lack of an environment that really motivated you to train, an environment where you would see these places, and I think America is ahead of us and is ahead of a lot of the world in that regards. We could see footages of people training in high school gyms in America, places like DeFranco's in America, where everybody's cheering each other on, everybody's sort of behind each other, and they're doing it together. Even though one person's lifting, they are all lifting. They're all lifting that weight. They're all going for that thing. And I just knew inherently that for a gym, a strength and conditioning gym, to be successful, it must have a certain culture where everybody is behind each other. Otherwise it won't work because of the natural, like the size of the place. It can't be too big, it can't be too small. And so the people must be associated in more ways than one. And that came, from my own experiences. As I grew, like through middle of high school and finished high school and stuff like that, different things else happened in my life, like my parents got divorced, and a lot of things that happened that shaped who I became and who I wanted to become. And I always knew and felt that you should always have this desire to be better in some way, like to eradicate weakness, I guess is the better way of putting it. To eradicate weakness in as many ways as possible. I think I guess the best way I can put it is to be an elite human. All right, yeah. I guess is the best way to put it. So because of that, like I enlisted in the army. My aim was to go special forces, but at that time I started uni, so I had to go the other way. I had to go reserves and then go into special forces and just in case, as a plan B. I enlisted into infantry and did the basic training in Kapuka, and I loved it. Things like that, things like army training, things like self-development, things like I said, just before, becoming a more elite human, just interested me, and I was more interested in that as the core of things rather than strength and conditioning, like lifting weights. Lifting weights is, to me, the surface of it all, is what you see. It's the vehicle that allows you to become a more elite human, And it doesn't matter whether you're an athlete or not. I think everybody listening to this, whether they're training just for recreational purposes, whether they want to lose weight, whether they want to look better, whatever it is, they just want to feel more confident. I think that is just a surface level thing. I think everybody should strive to really do their best in every aspect as much as they can before they die. Whether that's being able to show themselves, prove to themselves or the world. Different people get motivated in different ways, some intrinsically, some extrinsically. You should be able to show yourself or the world, whatever motivates you, that what you are capable of physically, what you're capable of intellectually, what you're capable of in regards to a creative way. All those stuff you should be able to always be working on. You shouldn't be just vegetating out on a couch in front of a TV every day and die one day just like the next person next to you in the cemetery. There is no differentiating factor between you and them. And so that was always important to me. It's always what drove me, and it's still one of the things that scares me is dying one day, getting news tomorrow that I have 1 week to live, and I still haven't achieved a lot of the stuff that I know I can achieve, that I want to achieve, because there's not enough time. That's one of the things that drives me, that motivates me, and that's basically what Adonis Athletics is. It's not about weights. It's not about setting records. It just so happens that we have a lot of athletes under that roof that set a lot of world records. So if you think about like per capita of world records and national records, we are one of the highest in the country. But that's not because I set up to train athletes that will break world records. It's because I try and instill within the culture that idea of being an elite human. Whether you're an athlete or not, whether you're professional or amateur, whether you're young or old, whether you're a beginner or experienced, it doesn't matter. You should be doing more because you deserve to do more. There's still more. Like, it's like, I don't know if you've heard the sort of expression, if I was to ask everybody in the room to put their hands up as high as possible And then I go, put it even higher, people go, a little bit more, you know. So you didn't do everything, you still got more, you know. I'm asking you for more, so do more, you know. And so that's basically essentially what Adonis Athletics is about. That's why the culture is the way that it is.
That's awesome. That's an amazing message. It's sort of like the early 1900s, how people like learning different languages and weightlifting, gymnastics, wrestling. It's like making that new school.
Basically, that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. And I thought maybe we'll go into a little bit more of like the strength training thing, because you're known obviously as a strength coach, not just for powerlifters, but it's because of your athletic background.
Yeah.
You know, going to worlds, breaking the world record, deadlift world record. That's how you're known, and for all the amazing results you've had. I think we wanted to talk a little bit about more specifics and technicalities and strength training.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. So I thought maybe we'll start off. Something that you always talk about is, especially for beginners, is having a really solid foundation. Lots of hypertrophy work. That's why, like, you know, bodybuilders have a great foundation for powerlifting. Did you want to talk a little bit about that and how? Because I know you've spoken quite a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has come like through my experience over the years. We've had obviously a lot of people who walked through the doors of all the different Adonis Athletics through the years, and so that gives us a lot of data, a lot of information to work with, real life information to work with. And of those people that have walked through the door, the ones that say they want to become powerlifters and they want to become good powerlifters, you start to notice a trend over time. And that trend that I started to notice was that the ones that came to me who were already from a decent background of just training, so going to the gym, doing bodybuilding, even doing like other sports as kids, you know, the more sports they participated in before they came to powerlifting, and this applies across all sports as well, and the more developed their body was, like muscularly, the more ready they were physically, the quicker they rose to the top within powerlifting, and the longer they stayed at the top within powerlifting. So I think hypertrophy work, or bodybuilding work, muscular development work, I think it's not given enough credit in this day and age. And the shift for me came because you got to understand, I've been training since I was 13. I've been in and out of all types of gyms you can imagine. Whereas a lot of people listening to this right now got into training because they saw a powerlifter somewhere on Instagram. I got into training because of bodybuilding magazines that I used to flick through. So the way I got introduced is different to what a lot of the listeners now got introduced to it. I've been inside old school gyms that were in the basement of some old guy's house, like in western suburbs of Sydney, like an actual gym where you paid membership. It was in his basement, where everything there was handmade by himself, like he had welded everything himself, all old school rusty equipment. That like all tradies used to train there, and they used to come after work, all big, strong men, I've trained at the roughest types of gyms out in Bankstown and western suburbs with gearheads, mixed it with them. I've trained at pretty gyms. I've trained at all types of gyms, CrossFit gyms. I've trained at strength and conditioning gyms, bodybuilding specific gyms. So you start to see over time who does better in what type of things, who progresses and gets to the top a little bit better. And every single time, the more preparation somebody has given their body before coming to powerlifting, the easier they've risen to the top within the field of powerlifting and stayed there. Myself personally, I think one of the reasons why I took to powerlifting much easier and I progressed well with it, I don't think it's, genetics at the top level definitely plays a role for sure. But when I was young, since I was young, my dad always put me into sports. And I was always just a generally active kid when I was younger. So they all play a big role in the person understanding proprioception, where their body is within space, how to control their body within space. They have more athletic ability. Whereas somebody new who comes, who's in their early 20s, never really done any sports before, and you're trying to teach them the hip hinge, they can't get it. It takes time. Now, that's fine, you'll eventually coach them through that and they'll get it. but that's time wasted because now they need X amount of time to learn the hip hinge properly. Then when they learn the hip hinge, they need X amount of time to go just train with very light weight. Then X amount of time to do the pass through the beginner stages, and then the intermediate stages, and then advanced, and then elite level. So that all takes time. But if it's already been taken care of by them doing general muscular development and general movements earlier on, before even thinking about powerlifting, then those things are going to be much easier to pass on and take on and be able to move on from when it's time to go heavy, when it's time to get more technical. They will understand what their body is supposed to do at a particular point. So with us, everybody who starts, especially if they have no particular aspiration to compete immediately, they will always begin on a program which resembles more what bodybuilding would look like rather than what powerlifting would look like. We would never put them straight into like triples or heavy fives or anything like that. We would take our time to really build the body and progress from there.
Cool. And when you say time, are we talking like years? We're talking a better half of a year?
So when somebody comes to us, no, we wouldn't. It wouldn't be years because we can't anymore, right? They've come to us obviously saying, I want to compete within the next 12 months. So we would say, okay, can we push that out as far as possible, that comp? Can we make it towards the end of those 12 months? Because if so, then in the first 3/4 of that year, we can just focus on just developing muscle, developing movement patterns, developing capabilities in the squat, bench press, and deadlift, and really honing down what's supposed to be done, and really identifying weaknesses, problems that might come about, and then going into the sort of the first comp. Maybe for that particular person, a better strategy is for them to do 2 comps within that 12-month period. So the first comp you may not peak for at all. It will just be bodybuilding, and then you just go straight into the comp, and you just come back off the back of that, continue the bodybuilding sort of hypertrophy blocks, and take what you learn and go from there. But for a lot of people, I think they're leaving a lot of kilos on the table by going straight into strength blocks when they are absolute beginners and trying to do like just heavy fives and triples. Not enough volume. There's just not enough volume. It takes much longer to progress that way. I think people need to give a serious thought as to where they are within their training and whether they should do more hypertrophy, more base building work, more general physical preparedness work before jumping into more specific strength work. Yeah.
Cool.
How much of the initial programs for like beginners would you have on a barbell versus non-barbell accessories or GPP work?
The ratio-wise, there's definitely it's on the lesser side.
Yeah.
So all we're trying to do is once they say they want to get into like powerlifting and stuff like that, they need to start using a barbell so to get accustomed to it straight away. But it depends how far off they are in regards to their capabilities of movement and stuff like that. If they're really bad, it might be a barbell, but it might just be an empty barbell, or it might just be a dowel. But generally, majority of people that come to us because of the type of clientele we draw, they are not absolute beginners. They've been under the bar a little bit. They understand. They just need sharpening, and they need some good direction. So with people like that, you can give them a good variety of barbell and dumbbell exercises. No real need for body weight stuff, and they generally take to it pretty well, and they can go from there. But yeah, for somebody else who's like a real beginner, I mean, you wouldn't go with a loaded barbell straight away. You want to make sure the movement pattern is good, it's sound, and it's consistently sound before you start to give them any progressions. Yeah.
And apart from them just telling you their training history, what indicators do you look at to know if someone, do they look like to understand their training age, if they're ready for more heavy work, or if they need to be into more volume?
So their training history, when they tell you that automatically is a very strong indicator of what they probably can and cannot handle. Their age also itself is a biological age. is a good indicator. If they are older, they're typically a little bit more developed, a little bit stronger naturally, a little bit resistant to certain injuries naturally. So that's going to make a difference. Athletic background is also going to make a difference. Somebody who's coming from a better athletic background can probably take on and is more confident with new skills, taking on new skills and learning them. And that also ties in with just personality. So just general confidence is a great thing to look at. What type of personality they have. If they're generally like, you feel that they're sort of nervous, you know, they may not take well to learning a new skill immediately, you know, being loaded and stuff like that. So you really scale things back. You know, instead of a squat, you might do a goblet squat, for example, and hone things down. And it's about building that person's confidence before moving on. That's really what it's about, because they could move well, but they may not be in themselves confident yet to move on and do more complex stuff. So you need to, it's not just about like, you know, just asking blatantly, you feel confident, you feel good to move on. It's about maybe asking a little bit more in-depth questions, you know, like how does that feel? And how does that feel different to when you first started? Do you feel like you're doing something different at different points of the lift? Getting them to explain it to you means that they understand it. If you can't really explain it, it means you don't really understand it. And if you can explain it simply, it means you definitely understand it, you know. So asking them questions like that and getting them to relate back to you the information and what their understanding of that movement is, that can be a very good indicator of how you should be progressing them, when you should be progressing them, to what degree you should be progressing them. Those things all play a very important factor, I think.
Cool. And I also heard, I think it was on the Weekly Weights podcast, you were talking about accessories, and the more elite an athlete is, there's a lesser need for the accessories, because the accessories are to improve on some sort of weakness, asymmetry, or something in the body.
Yeah.
I guess, at what point will you say, okay, I need to start cutting down on these accessories? Is it something you see? Is it more something that you would just tend to stop doing because of the level they're at, just to decrease volume? When will you start to do that?
So accessory gets cut down within two different contexts. So let's just define accessories. So we're talking non-barbell related movements that help the barbell related movement, right? So we're talking in relation to a leg press, in relation to a squat, a leg press, that would be an accessory, right? In relation to a squat, a front squat would be a variation. So both accessories and even variation to some degree would get cut down more and more as somebody gets either more and more advanced, or they're getting closer and closer to a competition. As they get closer to a competition, you would cut them down for the simple reason that you want them to dissipate fatigue. It's, you know, peaking time, and you want them to start to show the qualities of what they've been training for. You know, you're only trying to work on the specific skill because you have a certain amount of recovery capacity to work with, and so you don't want to waste it. So you're only doing squats, bench press, deadlift, and very close variations, basically. And the other context is, as somebody moves along over time, how much variation they do. So variation can be done within the context of a hypertrophy block, because there's just a lot of movement to do, a lot of different types of movements, a lot of volume, things like that. So as somebody's more advanced, you will do less and less extended hypertrophy blocks anyway, because of a couple of reasons. They've built the amount of muscle they need, likely, to be within their weight category. So you don't need any extra hypertrophy work, because they don't need to put on any more weight. They've established it pretty well. You will only need to do it a little bit just to make sure you keep touch with work capacity, because rest periods are shorter, you know, higher rep ranges, they help with that. And also make sure you're keeping muscles working through full ranges of motion, because that can sort of not happen during the strength block and peaking. Some exercises can be very specific and work certain joint angles and things like that. So muscles can need to be worked through full ranges of motion for a period of time to be able to, I guess, quote unquote, reset the body. Also, tendons and ligaments need to be moved through those ranges as well to restructure them, make them stronger, make them thicker, and sort of recondition them essentially. But as time goes on, those changes become permanent. So the muscle size that they've built becomes more or less permanent when somebody's elite level, you know. They're established in that weight division. Unless they want to go up or down a weight division, then you would change things around. If you want to go up a weight division, you would do more extended hypertrophy work so that they can put on more muscle. And even as far as like tendon thickness and durability, even that's established by that point. You know, somebody after a decade of lifting, if you ever look at, for example, how well their spine is protected using like soft tissue, that soft tissue around the spine, probably even the discs, would be much thicker, much denser compared to somebody who's just started out. So they don't need as much reinforcement work. So you can cut down on that time. And the thing is, the other reason why accessory work gets cut down is because the reason why accessory work, or rather variation work, gets done in the first place is to cover up weaknesses. As they're becoming more elite, those weaknesses start to go away. They get covered. At some point, they're going to get covered. Not 100%, but pretty damn near close to that. So all they really need to do is more and more of the actual thing. So more and more squatting, more and more deadlifting, you know, more and more bench pressing. They just need to improve their technicalities, the way their bar path is, the way their body positioning is. All that stuff needs to be improved more and more. Again, because they are firing on all cylinders, and so they can stress the body much more to a higher degree than a beginner can. So they only have a certain finite amount of recovery capabilities. So if you spend all this time doing all these different works for elite level lifters, they can exert a lot of force in all of those different things. They're just going to run out of gas. They're not going to be able to dedicate as much time as they needed to the actual movement to get better at the movement. So as time passes on, as somebody becomes more elite, accessory work gets cut back just by nature because they don't need to build as much musculature. They've filled it out likely, their category. And their variation work doesn't need to be as much either because they are becoming more and more technically proficient at their lift. So they just need to do more and more of their lift likely. That's typically the pattern that you see with people who become elite level lifters. There's only like the main lift, maybe one, maybe two variations of the exercise, maybe. And then here and there just touching on some accessory work that's of higher rep because it's just important to keep touch. That's it. But the majority of everything is just coming through the main work.
Yeah. I think that point you made about the tendon and ligament strength is massive as well.
Yeah.
And it ties into your point about especially newbies doing all the hypertrophy bodybuilding work. You know George Hackenschmidt, the Russian Lion? So he's got a book he wrote like 1941, and he talks about one of the things most important for strength is to build strong sinews.
Oh yeah.
And he's big on the weightlifting, bodybuilding stuff.
Yeah,
as well.
it's really important, you know, because it's not just about one system. You know, it's not just about the systems that are in charge of developing technique. It's not just about the muscular system. It's not just about the central nervous system. It's also about the soft tissue system. All four of those systems need to be developed concurrently and to different degrees. And you need to learn how to program so that they can all communicate with each other in regards to recovery, in regards to getting stressed and not overstressed. And that's ultimately how you're going to get there, because all of them play a factor in one way or another, you know. So I definitely agree. I think it's underlooked big time.
And all four of those systems, their time for recovery is all very different. How do you manage that in your program?
Absolutely. So technique and the systems that are required to just practice technique, they recover almost instantaneously. You can train technique multiple times a day even, and not overtrain. The muscular system takes 1 to 2 days to recover after being trained properly. So a particular muscle group, for example, once you train it, it takes 1 to 2 days for the muscular system just to recover from that training session. The central nervous systems takes 2 to 4 days, sometimes even longer, to recover. And the soft tissue system takes the longest partly because there's low blood flow to things like tendons, and it can really get worn down through like micro trauma, micro tears over time. So the way you want to, I guess, work it out is you got to understand where the athlete is in terms of how ready they feel and ready to go, continue going. You got to ask the right questions to the coach to see how they're feeling. If they feel real beat down, maybe it's time for a deload. If lifts are looking slower, they're not looking snappy, it's time to deload or to stop further progression to allow the nervous system to recover. The muscular system must also be accounted for, but it's typically the nervous system that you need to account for in regards to as the bulk, the bread and butter of the thing that you need to worry about is really the nervous system, or at least that's how I do it. The soft tissue and the tendons and ligaments and stuff like that, you just got to be careful not to overload them too quick when they're not used to a certain type of volume. That's going to cause them tendonitis and issues like that. And understand that every so often you need to pull back and do a deload to allow that micro trauma to start to heal. The muscular system, especially within a strength block, is not going to really be your blocking factor. The major issue is going to be the central nervous system, and you're not going to lose gains by delaying the muscular system a little bit here and there, because there's constant activation of the muscle with high tension, because it's such a high intensity during strength blocks. So the athlete is not going to go backwards in that regard. They're not going to lose muscle, especially if they're on a caloric deficit. They're ingesting enough protein, and they're just having regular high intensity or relative high intensity training blocks in terms of the strength block. So we want to try and simplify things as much as possible because there are so many moving parts, and you can easily just overcomplicate it and really confuse yourself. All you want to really do is make sure you're always in touch with the athlete and you see how the weight is moving, how fast it's moving, and how they're feeling. And this is something that I didn't know from the get-go. This is something that got developed over time as you start to see patterns. When you've worked for 8.5 years dealing with multiple athletes that come through the door, different types of experience levels, training backgrounds, different types of goals and stuff like that, you start to see patterns emerge in people, and that's irreplaceable. You can't buy that. You just need to spend 8.5 years doing it for you to see what's going on, and you start to notice things, and you start to be able to put a stop to things before things go pear-shaped. And that's really where it comes from. It's just a combination of university studies and extracurricular studies and just doing it at the gym. People coming over the years and seeing, I gave them this type of an exercise program, and they responded this way. Look, this other person sort of responded the same way as did these other 5 people. Okay, let's change these things and see where the changes get made within the athletes. And you start to see all these patterns come about, and then you document it for yourself, and you sort of write off the lessons that you learned. That's sort of how I've come about to learn all this stuff. So I guess it's just the time in the trenches.
Yeah. In your experience, we've talked a lot about soft tissue and tendons, etc. You said that more elite lifters, their soft tissue is much more developed, thicker. Do you think they have a higher tolerance for volume spikes than more beginner lifters?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, hell yeah. I mean, not only do they have a high tolerance for volume spikes, they typically need more volume within certain periods of their training, especially. Otherwise they're just not going to respond. So the body is just more resistant to injury, to fatigue. A stronger body will always be like that. That's why it's important, for example, for football players during their off season, or fighters, to engage in strength work, because they're going to become more unbreakable. And it's the same thing that you see in elite level lifters. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool. And between male and females, coaching male and females, obviously different bodies, different body types respond differently. I guess this is probably a whole topic, but what are kind of like the main points that maybe you could talk about the differences in coaching male to female?
Male and females?
Yeah.
Females tend to recover faster, and they tend to be able to handle more volume than males, typically due to the hormonal environment within their body, the hormonal status, as well as the overall muscle fiber type. So they can take on more and they can recover from it. As a general rule of thumb, especially for the upper body, they need much more volume than males to be able to develop, and that's why sort of in comparison, upper body wise, they do tend to suffer more in regards to strength. And that's also why you tend to see females, for example, bench press more reps, the same percentage of bench max compared to males. So in regards to training females, there is not a huge difference in regards to what you would do, but you just need to be aware of that. So sometimes they can grind out something that's very close to their max, but do more reps with it. So you might say, oh, that's at 90% of their max or whatever, but they could actually be much closer because they can grind out something that's close to their max for more reps than males can. So your estimation could be off. So you need to be aware of that. Also, certain periods, like if you're going, obviously you need to be aware of body weight in regards to competitions and stuff like that. When they're having the menstrual cycle, they can obviously retain water. That can play a major factor in regards to upcoming comp, in regards to timing, in regards to making body weight. So you got to be careful not to be sitting at too high a body weight naturally. If you're going to be preparing for a competition, you need to account for that in case something like the timing is off. So you're not panicking, and especially she is not panicking. In regards to psychologically, females generally tend to need a little bit more nurturing, a little bit more attention, and the way, the language that you would speak to them in, it would be different to males, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a different way of them understanding, a different language that you need to speak to be able to get your point across and to be able to keep them motivated and to be able to get them to excel. And that's the job of a coach, is to be able to adapt to the different types of athletes, whether it's male or female, or whether it's different males or different females. The different people respond to different types of motivational triggers, different types of language, and you need to be able to understand that there is that sort of a difference between male and female in regards to how they may process information, as in what's important to them, what they want to know, what they want to hear, what type of information they want to be relayed back to them, and they may feel a little bit more emotional, and they may feel like certain things aren't working as much, or they're stuck in a little bit of a rut. They may by nature make things bigger than it is, and it's your job as the coach to be able to put things in perspective and be able to communicate that back to them. Back to like physical characteristics and qualities, it is obviously common because of the increased Q angle for females, for there to be a lack of control of the knee, so like glute strength and control. So a lot of times in deadlifts, you might see as they're pulling off the ground, or if they're just about halfway up the shin, one or both of the knees collapse in. So you've got to be careful of that. You need to make sure that their stance width is first of all correct and optimized, and also the glute strength is adequate, so they have good knee control. Same thing can also happen in the squat, so you got to be aware of that. So that comes down to cueing as well as just strengthening the glutes, very important. And on a surface level, without getting too deep into it, that's about as much as you need to know. Other than that, females can do everything that males can do as far as sporting related activities and athleticism. Some things even better, and it's great to see so many more females every year just taking on weightlifting, powerlifting, strength sports, bodybuilding, and just getting into weight training in general. And I think it's great to see that stereotype smashed, you're a female and you shouldn't be doing weights to get bulky, etc., all that crap. So it's great to see it, and it's great to see some of them putting up a fight with some of the guys, on absolute strength. Like you got girls out squatting guys, you got girls out deadlifting, out sometimes bench pressing guys and stuff like that. So I think it's a great trend, and I think it should continue.
Yeah, awesome.
And then before you touched on the importance of the athlete-client communication, as a coach, we can't read people's minds. Sometimes they withhold information. What sort of things should be coaches asking and athletes telling the coaches?
Yeah, I think the coach needs to always know about the mindset of an athlete, how they're feeling at a certain point about how their training is going, how their life is going, and how different situations and circumstances within their life might be affecting their training. Obviously as coaches, one of the main things that we want to focus on always is retention of clients, and making sure they stick to the program. So in order to do that, we need to be coaches, and the job of a coach is to be friends with the athlete, be part of that athlete's life, and vice versa. So knowing that their dog maybe is sick and is about to pass away, and the dog is really important to them, and being understanding of that, knowing that maybe they're about to get married, and times are going to be a little choppy in terms of attendance because there's a lot of stress, there's things going on, etc. So understanding those type of things allows you to, first of all, as a coach, manage your expectations of the athlete, so you don't get angry at the athlete for no reason, and also be able to suggest things to the athlete in regards to better time management, better expectations of how situations should be. So an athlete might be going through a stressful exam period, for example, and they may not be able to train the normal 5 days a week. They need to condense that into 2 days a week for maintenance. Okay, well, coach, understanding that, we'll be able to relate to the athlete. Listen, these 2 days you'll be able to maintain for quite some time, no problems. But just understand, you're not going to be gaining a lot of strength. So don't be upset about that. I totally accept that. I'm understanding of it, and you should be as well. There's no problem. Once it's all finished, we'll get back on track again. This is going to be the situation, and that's how we're going to do it when we move forward. But at the same time, it is the job of the athlete to communicate with the coach. And I think it's very frustrating for coaches when athletes withhold information, sometimes on purposely, sometimes not, and they sort of chop and change maybe programs. They decide that they want to max out all of a sudden when you're not supposed to fucking max out, and just new things might happen in their lives. They don't want to talk, don't want to talk. Maybe they don't want to talk about it, or maybe they just don't say it. Whereas it could be important. So I always tell my athletes, the more you tell me, the better the results you're going to get. If I don't hear from you, if you don't share things that could potentially be important, I'm just going to be progressing forward as if everything is good, as if everything is as it's supposed to be, whereas it may not be. And if something goes wrong, I will not have any way of fixing it until it's too late. So please just let me know everything. The more I know, the better it is, and I can suggest things to you. So it's really important just being able to communicate, and also for the athlete to know that he or she needs to meet the coach halfway in sharing information where required. Obviously some stuff is a little bit more sensitive, and it's personal for them. They don't want to say it. That's fine. But the more we know, the better it is.
Cool. I think we touched on a lot of good points there. Normally finish with a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First one, is there a book that you would recommend? It could be about life, about training, about anything, but something that is one of the top ones on your list that you'd recommend to people. Yeah,
one of the best books I've ever read was How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's on the top list of every leader, every type of leader in the world, and I think it has some very valuable information in there that I've been able to use over time. And just like with any book, you got to read it again and again, every once or twice a year to refresh it in your mind. But it's definitely one of the best books in terms of developing life skills and people skills. That's come a long way for me.
Yeah, I think definitely in terms of like that coaching and building that relationship.
Yeah.
It talks a lot about just building relationship and communicating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very important. Very valuable.
Yeah. And the second one, is there a daily habit that you have? Something that you think it contributes to your success as a coach, a business owner, as an athlete?
I just every day when I wake up, I just think to myself, what is it that I want to get done today? What needs to get done today? I try not to wander through my days aimlessly. Even if I can't get them done on that day because of different factors, whatever it may be, I just try and not just passively go through the day. Every day I try and think, what is it that I want to get done today that's going to be in line what I need to get done this year, as part of my goals. I think that's one of the main things that I do that sort of keeps me on track.
Yeah. Awesome. And is there any advice that you would give your previous self, maybe as you embarked your Adonis mission, that you think maybe other people might learn off as well?
Try and in the early days get as many good people, valuable people on your team as possible. Don't try and do everything yourself.
Yeah, it's good advice. All right, awesome. And how can people contact you, keep in touch with what you're doing, find the Adonis Athletics gyms?
We've got the Adonis Athletics gym, so Adonis Athletics Granville, Adonis Athletics Penrith, Adonis Athletics Castle Hill, Campbelltown, and our newest one, Paddington. You can find them all on Instagram. You can find me personally at YeahTheFaz, YeahTheFaz, shoot us an email, shoot me a message. Happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.